Chapter 111 Lesser Creature. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny woke up from the oppressive feeling that drowned the whole world. The sunset was drawing near, and with it, the abyssal shadow of the Crimson Spire had once again fallen on the cursed city. The distant spire could be seen from anywhere in these somber ruins, looming over the forgotten shore like an eternal dark omen. It was cyclopean and unimaginably high, with its roots growing from the endless sea of crimson coral and its peak lost somewhere beyond the veil of grey clouds. In these past few months, Sunny had gotten accustomed to its presence and learned to not pay it any attention. Thinking about the spire was a sure road to madness. After all, somewhere inside that inconceivable structure lay their only hope of ever returning home. And hope was a poison. Yawning, Sunny stood up and stretched his arms. His good mood, which he had momentarily lost for some strange reason, was already returning. Now that he had some time to put the events of the previous night into perspective, he understood even more clearly how amazing his luck had been recently. The acquisition of the Stone Saint and her following transformation into a shadow were nothing short of miraculous. His life was about to change for the better. However, Sunny had to think things through thoroughly. He was in uncharted waters in regards to how to cultivate his pet monster. The initial excitement he felt after realizing that the Shadow Saint was capable of consuming memories to collect shadow fragments was gone. In its place, there now was a series of uncomfortable questions. Sunny had spent somewhere around 6 months on the Forgotten Shore. In all this time, he had only been able to collect 3 memories that were suitable to be fed to the shadow, giving her mere 6 shadow fragments. With the current speed of progression, he would have to wait for 16 full years to see his labor bear fruit and find out what exactly was going to happen once the Stone Saint had accumulated all 200 shadow fragments that the runes demanded. Even among the elites of Gunlog's army, there was no one who had survived on the Forgotten Shore for more than 10 years. The king of the castle himself had only been here for 8, and only lived that long in large part due to luck. Granted, Sunny's battle ability would grow dramatically once the deadly Stone Knight was added into the equation, but still, it was too long. He had to think of something. While he was doing the math, Sunny's eyes fell on the iron chest that stored his painstakingly accumulated fortune of soul shards. Distracted, he froze for a few moments, then hesitantly approached the chest and stared at its lid. By the standards of the Forgotten Shore, he was an incredibly rich man. His fortune could buy him a lot of things in the castle, from comparatively simple to increasingly rare and hard to come by. Some of the things that could be easily bought in that pit of despair he didn't even want to think about. What interested him the most, however, was the possibility of acquiring a large amount of memories. Powerful memories with useful enchantments were not cheap. In fact, they were extremely expensive. But he didn't really care about the quality. Since Stone Saint could get the same amount of fragments from the most useless of memories, all he needed was quantity. If he were to spend all of his shards, her power would instantly leap by a considerable amount. In the future, he would be able to cultivate the shadow at double the speed, too, half of the materials coming from the memories he would be acquiring from slaying monsters, the other from the memories he would be buying with the soul shards the monsters had left behind. That would potentially reduce the overall time frame to a somewhat sensible period. However, there was a big problem with this plan. Once Sunny began to spend a large number of soul shards, he would inevitably draw a lot of attention. Dealing with random daredevils who would try to rob him, while not pleasant, was not a big problem. But if Gunlog himself were to become interested in his exploits, that would spell disaster. And then there was Nephice, whose presence made any sort of planning futile for reasons that only she and Sunny knew. Everyone else seemed to be blind and deaf to the truth, which was the source of the problem. Sunny frowned and turned away from the chest. I might come back to this idea later. But first, I'll have to check if consuming memories is the only way for a shadow to grow stronger. He still wanted to know if the Stone Saint could absorb shadow fragments by slaying nightmare creatures, just like he could. Some time later, Sunny was cautiously moving through the stone maze of the Forsaken City. Able to become one with the shadows, he had a certain advantage over anyone else who would dare to explore these cursed ruins in the absolute darkness of the night. However, even he was always just one step away from death. Attracting the attention of the real masters of the streets, the fallen creatures who dwelled here from the ancient times, would be the end of him. Sunny had no illusions about that. Humans only survived here by learning how to avoid the fallen ones and seek out weaker monsters to hunt. There weren't a lot of lesser creatures who were able to secure a foothold in the cursed city, so hunting them was always dangerous. Nevertheless, that was what Sunny had made into his profession, and that was what he was doing now. Finally, he reached the area where he had observed a particular creature in the past. Surprisingly, Sunny was intimately familiar with that type of monster. After all, one of them had almost cost him his life in the past. Somewhere around this particular street, a lone carapace centurion had made its lair. Climbing atop a tall stone column, Sunny stood motionlessly in the darkness and waited for his prey to appear. Time moved excruciatingly slowly, but a good hunter had to have a lot of patience. His dark eyes pierced the veil of night, observing the ghostly ruins. 1 hour passed, then another. Sunny waited. Soon, his patience was finally rewarded. From the deep darkness of one of the toppled buildings, a familiar hulking shape appeared in all its menacing beauty. The carapace centurion stepped onto the cobblestones, his black carapace decorated with crimson patterns, 2 terrifying bone scythes scraping against the stone. Sunny smiled. The carapace centurion only had time to take a single step before 2 crimson flames suddenly ignited in the deep shadows that consumed the ruined street. Then, a graceful stone knight stepped out of the darkness. Raising her shield, she rested the blade of her sword on its rim. Wisps of ghostly gray fog were seeping from under her armor, a strange dark radiance emanating from her skin. The darkness around seemed to move, as though wanting to embrace her like a dark mantle. The 2 monsters, one massive and savage, one small and steadfast, froze opposite each other. And then, all hell broke loose. Chapter 112 Duel of the Monsters. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Just like in the battle against 2 fallen beasts, the stone saint attacked first. Striking her sword against the rim of the shield twice, she dashed forward without fear or hesitation. Of course, Sunny was not sure if shadows were even capable of feeling fear. The carapace centurion reacted swiftly and savagely, lunging at her in a furious onslaught of adamantine chitin and jagged blades. In front of this towering creature, Shadow Saint looked meager and slight. The 2 monsters collided in the middle of the street, a small shockwave spreading outward from the point of their impact. Dust and small pieces of gravel were sent flying through the air. Sunny watched the battle with vigilant eyes. He suspected that these 2 nightmare creatures were somewhat equal in terms of power. The centurion was much bigger and heavier, the impenetrable carapace making it an especially deadly adversary. All carapace creatures were unnaturally tough and strong. It also had the advantage of reach and mass. The Shadow Saint was equally as resilient due to her heavy armor and stone-like nature. Despite her small frame, the graceful knight possessed a stunning amount of strength. Sunny also had to keep reminding himself that she was not actually human, and as a being made of stone, weighed much more than a human would. The disadvantage of her size was bridged by battle awareness and skill, making the outcome of the fight unpredictable. However, that was only true if he failed to account for the dark embrace of his shadow. With its reinforcement, the Stone Saint was unimaginably more powerful. Sunny was pretty sure that the centurion stood no chance. Meanwhile, the 2 monsters were entwined in a ferocious battle. The Shadow Saint withstood the onslaught of bone scythes by bashing one away with her shield and evading the other. Not losing her momentum, she brought the shield down and slammed its edge into the centurion's carapace, causing the hulking creature to stagger. The force of the impact was so grievous that it sent cracks running through the impregnable carapace. Sunny marveled at the sight, congratulating himself on the decision to not test the augmented monster's strength on himself. Using the opening that she had created, the stone saint twisted her torso and delivered a backhand blow with the boss of the shield, striking the same spot again. The already damaged chitin plate splintered, revealing the soft flesh beneath. A moment later, she was already moving to evade the fierce retaliation of the savage carapace creature. The graceful knight was miserly in her movements, dodging each strike with measured precision. Although Sunny was only a novice in the art of combat, he had learned enough to be able to recognize the hints of a distinct battle style in how the stone saint fought. Her whole technique was based in simplicity and economy of movement, each action calculated and efficient. Combining hard blocks, dodges and deflections with grounded footwork and well-timed ripostes, the Shadow was able to create a stark contrast between defense and offense, the former being solid and indomitable, the latter abrupt and inevitable. It was very different from the flowing and unpredictable style that Nephi's had used, and that he himself had been taught. Only now did Sunny realize that the basic katas and forms he had practiced were, in fact, very unique and unusual. Where did his fighting style come from? There was a lot to consider here, both in terms of how to improve his current technique and how to incorporate new elements into it. However, that was a task for the future. Right now, he was more interested in the outcome of the fight. The stone saint was already suppressing her monstrous enemy. A few of the centurion's legs were either broken or severed, streams of azure blood gashing out of the terrible wounds. However, it was still resisting furiously. But no matter how enraged it became, the silent and menacing poise of the graceful Shadow Knight was much more terrifying. Just at that moment, the Shadow Saint sidestepped a downward slash of one of the centurion's scythes and then pinned it under her greave. Using her weight to immobilize the enemy's weapon, she delivered a vicious blow with the rim of her shield and shattered the bone blade into pieces. The carapace monster screeched, dazed by the loss of its scythe, and immediately tried to eviscerate the loathsome little fiend with the remaining one. However, he was a fraction of a second too late. With one side of its body left defenseless, the stone saint now had much more space to attack. Deflecting the scythe with the shield, she dashed forward and lashed out with an upward slash, severing it near the joint. Continuing the motion, she then stepped through the rain of azure blood and mercilessly thrust her sword into the opening in the centurion's armor that had been created by her at the start of the fight. The stone blade pierced through the flesh of the monster and devastated its spine. The force of the blow was so immense that the tip of the sword broke through the chitin on the centurion's back. Pulling the sword out of the dying creature's body with one sharp motion, the Shadow Saint shook the blood off the blade. Then, she indifferently stepped back and froze, seemingly turning into a dark, motionless sculpture. Only the crimson fire still burning in her ruby eyes betrayed that the shadow was alive. Sunny held his breath, waiting for the spell to speak. Soon, he heard its faintly familiar voice. "You have slain an awakened monster, Carapace Centurion. Your shadow grows stronger." Slightly disappointed, he summoned the runes and checked the number of the shadow fragments in his possession. Shadow fragments. 307/1000. 90. 3 left to 400, he thought automatically. Then, just to be sure, Sunny glanced at the description of the stone saint. Shadow fragments. 6/200. So, just like with the echoes, the kills performed by the shadow benefited her master instead of the monster herself. It seemed as though consuming memories was truly the only way to feed the stone saint. Sunny frowned. Well, that complicates things. Chapter 113 Dark. While you are listening at novelfull.audio. After the Shadow Saint had ruthlessly eviscerated the Carapace Centurion and confirmed Sunny's suspicion that he wouldn't be able to cultivate her in that way, he was left with nothing much to do. The knight was still young, but he had already achieved his goal. Now, he was free to do whatever he wished. However, there weren't very many options available in the cursed city. He could continue to hunt, reveling in the newfound power. With the stone saint at his command, Sunny would be able to bathe the ruins in monster blood. However, that thought, no matter how seductive, left him uneasy. Hunting in this hellish place required patience and preparation. He only survived this long by carefully scouting the potential battlegrounds in advance and studying his prey from the shadows to learn its strengths and weaknesses, not rushing into a fight until he was absolutely sure that there was a solid chance of victory. Shadow Saint or not, betraying these principles would still get him killed. And with his mental state, slightly unstable, Sonny didn't trust himself to stay cautious once the easy wins kept piling up. He had to proceed slowly. Looking around the quiet ruins, Sonny smiled slightly. Actually, he wasn't that far from the library. He had indeed turned hunting nightmare creatures into a sort of profession, but it was just that. A job. Like any well-adjusted young man, he also had a hobby. In his free time, Sonny liked to explore the ruins. The warm feeling of satisfaction he had experienced after finding the hidden nest of the vile thieving bird never left his memory. There was something deeply engaging in uncovering fragments of long-lost history and piecing them together. Maybe Sonny had inherited this passion from teacher Julius, or maybe it had always been slumbering deep within his heart. In any case, he enjoyed exploring the ancient city a great deal. It was full of all kinds of mysteries, both large and small. After thousands of years had passed, most traces of the past had been erased by the merciless flow of time. But by looking in the right places and exercising critical thinking, insight and imagination, it was possible to piece together tiny shards of truth. Every time the seemingly disparate clues clicked into a coherent picture, Sonny felt a pleasant rush. Interestingly enough, it didn't matter whether that picture pertained to something important or completely useless. In fact, he enjoyed learning about the small details of the daily life that the inhabitants of the ancient city had once led much more than he enjoyed learning about the possible origins of the catastrophe that had befallen them, despite the fact that the latter was directly related to his own survival. For example, he was very curious to learn more about the young priestess whose private quarters he had made into his secret lair. The things she had left behind told him a lot about how the people of the city used to dress and think about the world, filling his imagination with colorful pictures of crowded streets and solemn cathedrals. But it was still not enough. His latest exploration project was the ruins of a grand library. Of course, none of the books and scrolls had survived the thousands of years in the cursed darkness. Luckily, the people who used to live in the city before its fall were very fond of stone engravings. He spent a lot of time studying the intact wall carvings, as well as fragments of surviving frescoes. One fresco, in particular, was especially grandiose and tantalizing, covering the entire floor of the library's main hall. Sadly, it was almost completely buried under rubble. Sonny had managed to clear some of it away, but most pieces of the collapsed roof were too heavy for him to lift. Maybe the Shadow Saint would have more luck. It was a suitable plan, but, for some reason, Sonny felt strangely reluctant to return to the exploration of the library on that particular night. What else can I do? He jumped down from the stone column and approached the dead carapace centurion to carve out some meat and the soul shards. Come to think of it, the spot marked on the crude map that he had found on the body of the strange hunting party's leader was not that far away, too. Maybe he could check it out. Sonny vehemently shook his head. No, the map has to be fake anyway. Right. Trying to suppress the unhealthy fire of curiosity burning in his chest, Sonny concentrated on the task at hand. Once the meat and the shards were in his possession, though, the persistent desire to follow the map returned. And if it's not fake, that's even worse. Who knows what kind of horror those fools were searching for? Surely, there wouldn't be any treasure or important secrets hidden there. This whole thing smelled of nothing but peril. In fact, it reeked of something sinister, terrifying, and utterly evil. Sonny sighed. But honestly, what's the harm in taking one tiny look? It's just one look. What's the worst that can happen? Quietly stepping through the stone rubble, Sonny cautiously approached the spot marked on the map. For some strange reason, very few nightmare creatures seemed to choose this remote part of the city as their hunting grounds. It was as though they were compelled to avoid this place. Come to think about it, that fact alone would be enough to scare Sunny away. In normal circumstances. But with the stone saint hiding in his shadow, he felt a bit braver. He would be able to run away if anything happens, at least. Approaching a large building that had been magnificent once, Sunny climbed over the collapsed wall and found himself in a dark and secluded courtyard. In the center of the courtyard, there was a well. Its round mouth loomed like an open wound in the stone, filled with nothing but empty blackness. The well was covered with a strange, ornate iron grate. It must have weighed several tons at least, as though someone desperately wanted to prevent anything from ever lifting it from its place and leaving the well open. Sunny gulped before approaching and looking through the grill of the grate. The silent well was so deep that he couldn't see its bottom. Maybe there wasn't one. Picking up a small stone, Sunny dropped it down. The black mouth of the well swallowed the stone, making it disappear. Many seconds passed, but there was no sound of the rock hitting anything. Sunny was almost ready to try again, but then. The well spoke. A melodic, strangely enchanting voice resounded from its dark depths, filling Sunny's ears with sweetness. Ah, a guest. He staggered back, his eyes opening wide in fear. Nope. Not doing that. Sunny wanted to turn around and run away, but something stopped him from following his instinct. He sensed that leaving without finding out more was going to be a wrong decision. And the voice sounded so human-like. It was like the voice of someone you would want to be your friend. He shook his head, breaking free from the reverie. What were those damned fools up to? What are they doing there in that damn castle? I need to warn Nephice. No, wait. I need to find out more first. I'll try to understand what is going on here, but if there's any sign of danger, I run. Gritting his teeth, Sunny forced himself to stay still. A moment later, the well whispered. How wonderful. I haven't been fed in a long, long time. Chapter 114 Voice of Darkness. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The enchanting voice came from the well in a wave of whispering echoes. It was soft and charming, flowing like a smooth silken melody. It seemed to belong to a young man, if mere humans could even possess such a voice. A divine being would suit it more. Or a profane one. Sunny wasn't in the mood to appreciate the smooth and rich texture of the voice, though. He was covered in cold sweat. The echoes whispered. Time. In all his time on the Forgotten Shore, Sunny had only met one other creature capable of mimicking human speech. The memory of that encounter still made him tremble. The thing that had come from the depths of the dark sea in a mantle of fog and stolen Cassie's voice was by far the most terrifying being he had ever met. He didn't even want to remember the utter horror he had felt when the swarm of whispering voices had surrounded him. On that night, Sunny had only been able to keep his sanity intact because of the blind girl's timely warning. He had only survived the meeting with the creature that possessed a human voice by keeping his eyes tightly shut. And now, here was another. Why were those hunters searching for this ancient horror? He frowned. If something sinister was brewing inside the castle, he had to warn Changing Star. But he couldn't do anything before establishing at least some understanding of the entire situation. That's why Sunny forced himself to stay still despite the fact that every instinct in his body screamed for him to run away. Instinct was not always the best advisor. Humans possessed intelligence for a reason. The black fissure of the well loomed in front of him like a pool of darkness. Suddenly, he was incredibly grateful for the immensely heavy ornate grate that kept the charming talker imprisoned in the lightless depths. Sunny licked his lips and tried to regain his composure. Ready to summon the Stone Saint and the Midnight Shard at any moment, he took a step forward and gazed into the dark emptiness once again. Then, he slowly said. It's nice to meet you. He couldn't quite believe that he was trying to communicate with the terrifying prisoner of the well instead of running away without looking back. Life was sure full of surprises. Until the moment it gave you the last one, of course. A soft chuckle resounded from the well. After its melodious murmur disappeared in the darkness of the secluded courtyard, the voice said. "Oh, no, the pleasure is mine." The echoes whispered. Mine, mine, mine." Sonny was considering his next words very carefully. My life might be depending on what I say next. He couldn't help but remember old fairy tales about terrible monsters that liked to play riddles with lost children. One wrong answer, and the children were devoured, never to be seen again. Was he going to end up in similar danger? It was still not too late to turn back. However, before he could ask his question or make the decision to retreat, the thing in the well spoke again. It said. "So, are you guys going to feed me or not? Not to offend anyone, but lately, you've been very tardy. I have been sitting here by my lonesome for 3 days already. Or have you decided to try something new?" Sonny blinked. What? That wasn't exactly what he expected to hear from the mouth of an ancient evil. The thing sounded so human. He was almost tempted to believe that it actually was. "That's how it gets you, fool." Sonny forced himself to remain vigilant. What did he know about how primordial evils were supposed to talk, anyway? If it was able to steal the knowledge of human language from his head, it would surely be able to steal some other things too. While Sonny was trying to comprehend what was happening, a few seconds flew by. The voice waited for a bit, then returned. "Oh, I see. So we are going with starvation now. Well, I have to give you guys some credit, this is your best idea yet. Sadly, it won't work. Do you even know what type of diets we trainees have to follow to debut? I guess not. Actually, I have to thank you. This is a great opportunity to work on my BMI. The echoes whispered. BMI, BMI, BMI. Wait, what? Sonny stared into the well, dumbfounded. His eye twitched. Don't tell me that there is really just some guy sitting on the bottom of that damn well. Feeling like the world suddenly stopped making any sense, he rubbed his temples, then asked in a strange tone. Who are you? The well fell silent. Sonny tried to remember what the charming voice had told him before. Something about not being fed in a long time. It surely sounded ominous and creepy in the moment, but if he looked at it a bit differently, if the group of hunters he lured to their deaths had been on its way to deliver food to a prisoner, then that would explain why the poor guy had to skip a few meals. But why would they keep someone imprisoned in this remote area of the ruins? Meanwhile, the voice spoke again. This time, it sounded tense. Wait, you're not one of the, you're not, oh. Oh, gods. Sonny covered his face with his hand, realizing what was going to happen next. Oh, gods. It's not a human, heavens, I'm going to die. Those damn fools finally got me killed. From the perspective of a sleeper locked inside a well in the middle of the ruins, only 2 types of beings could come here to find him. Either his captors or nightmare creatures. Sonny revealed that he wasn't one of the captors by asking his last question, which left only one other possibility. The fact that he came to the well during the night, alone, and not using anything to light the way only made the conclusion easier to make. Wait, it speaks, oh, gods. I've only ever heard of one other creature on the Forgotten Shore that can mimic human speech, no. Not like this. Damn, he really does have a nice voice. It's beautiful even when full of despair, what? It's just a voice. Why am I so enamored with, Was he so desperate to hear a human voice? Why? He was doing fine on his own. Great, even. Better than ever. Focus on the task. But what exactly was the task? Sonny had never expected to find a human at the end of the crude map. What was he supposed to do now? I guess the first step would be to find out who the guy in the well is, and how he got there. Then I can decide what to do with him, or if I should do anything at all. But there hid the problem. First, Sonny had to convince the young man in the well that he was actually a human, too. Sonny glanced at his shadow, feeling somewhat helpless. The shadow was bent over, holding its stomach. Its shoulders were shaking. Chapter 115 Nightingale. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sonny could really understand how bad the situation looked from the perspective of the young man with a beautiful voice. The only thing that could be worse than approaching a terrifying dark well while thinking that there's an ancient and utterly evil creature hiding inside was to actually be locked inside that terrifying dark well while thinking that some abominable thing was looking down on you from above. At least Sonny had a chance to escape if things were to turn really bad. The poor guy in the well literally had nowhere to run. Of course, there was still the possibility that all of this was just a cunning act performed by some incredibly horrifying monster. Sonny had to keep that in mind while exploring the other theory. So, if he is indeed a human, how do I make him believe that I'm not a monster? That wasn't a very simple task for Sonny. He had never been good at communicating with people in the first place, and 3 months of complete isolation did not make things any better. In fact, they had made everything worse. Now, even Sonny sometimes felt uncomfortable when talking to himself. What would Cassie say? He cleared his throat. Are you a human? I am too. I am a human, too. We are both humans. Great job, idiot. After that abhorrent attempt, Sonny wouldn't be even surprised to find out that he was not, in fact, a human. Who talks like that? The young man in the well grew silent. Then, he silently said. Yeah, it's definitely all over for me. Oh, well. I had a good run, I guess. Sonny sighed heavily. Stop panicking, you idiot. I really am a human. The owner of the charming voice laughed. Please forgive me if I don't believe you. He was using respectful honorifics, as though recognizing Sonny as an elder. Which was logical, given that he believed him to be an eldritch horror. An eldritch horror would technically count as an elder, all things considered. Sonny groaned inwardly. Why are you using honorifics? I bet I'm younger than you. The young man imprisoned in the well hesitated. Wait, you really are a human. Sonny smiled with excitement, feeling that he was making progress. Yes. I really am. The voice returned a dozen seconds later. How come you're here alone and in the middle of the night? You also don't seem to have any source of light with you. Please don't get angry, Sir Monster, but that's not exactly something a human would be able to do. Maybe you should work on your story a bit more next time you venture out to devour innocent souls. Just a piece of friendly advice. Sonny sighed. Very funny. I'm able to walk around the city at night because my aspect allows me to hide in the darkness. I can also see through it, too. How did you end up in this well, anyway? The young man lingered before answering. How does one usually end up in these situations? A bunch of thugs decided to shake me down for my memories. I politely refused, and here we are. They've been keeping me here for a couple of weeks, trying all kinds of methods to get me to transfer the memories to them. But I must say, their attempts were very clumsy. In terms of knowing how to terrorize people, these fellows are not even anywhere near the laziest of Saisiangs. Sonny didn't know what a Saisiang was, so he just assumed that it was some kind of a horribly malevolent nightmare creature. The rest of the story was somewhat easy to believe. Of course, it would take a very special kind of fool to choose the ruins, of all places, to keep a prisoner, but thugs were not known for their intelligence. Plus, their plan seemed to have worked pretty well right until the moment they had the misfortune of stumbling onto Sonny. Well, now he knew what this whole thing was about. Just some tiresome human business. How disappointing. Nephice and Cassie were also not in any sort of danger, at least not with regard to this mess. The mystery was solved. He had wasted a whole night on this nonsense. I see. Well, goodbye. With an annoyed sigh, Sunny turned around and began to walk away. However, the owner of the beautiful voice stopped him. Wait. Wait. Are you really human? Sunny grimaced. I am. I've told you already. The young man imprisoned in the well hurriedly asked. Can you maybe get me out of here? Those guys are not coming back tonight, I think. If you help me escape, I'll make it worth your while. Sunny scratched the back of his head, then frowned. In what way? After a short pause, the charming voice returned again, this time somewhat hesitant. Well, you might not know this, but I am quite a rich person. I have a whole stash of soul shards back in the castle. Some might even say that I have a small fortune. Half of it is yours if you get me out of this pit. That's 10 shards, at least. Sunny suddenly got an idea. Of course, he did not need the 10 shards that the young man was offering. The fact that he had these shards, though, that was potentially very useful. If he wanted to avoid unnecessary attention when buying memories with his hoard of soul shards, he would need a suitable proxy. A sleeper with a lot of shards of his own, one that was indebted to Sunny no less, was a perfect candidate. He smiled. Do people know that you have a fortune? The young man answered, a bit of surprise in his voice. Do they, know? Yeah, I guess they do. I am known to spend a lot from time to time. On entertainment, as well as, some other things. I'm a patron of arts, one can say. Perfect, so no one would be surprised if he suddenly begins to spend shards on memories. However, there was a small problem. Sunny could remove the grate, but he had no way of helping the poor guy climb out of that unimaginably deep well. Even if he was to use the prowling thorn, he doubted that the invisible string would reach that far. Its maximum length was not that impressive. And he certainly was not going to climb into the creepy well himself. Plus, he still held a bit of suspicion about the charming young man's identity. He was almost certain that he was human, but the remaining tiny bit of doubt was enough to make his paranoia ring the alarm. After hesitating for a bit, Sunny said. What's your name? The melodic voice answered. It's Kai. Sunny sighed. Well, Kai, I don't know how to tell you this, but unless you can fly, I won't be able to help you escape. The young man grew quiet. After a long pause permeated with deathly silence, he then said in a strange tone. That I can. Sunny blinked. What? Did he hear wrong? No, that was unlikely. Maybe Kai was just willing to say anything in his desperation to escape. The prisoner of the well chuckled. I can fly. That's my aspect ability. Chapter 116 Deal with the Devil. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sunny considered Kai's words. An ability that allowed the awakened to fly was not unheard of, but it was rather rare. And here on the Forgotten Shore, where a cursed flood of darkness devoured the world every night, it was nothing short of priceless. Sunny couldn't even imagine how easier it would have been to traverse the labyrinth with someone like Kai by his side. Suddenly, it made a lot more sense why someone like him would possess a small fortune of soul shards. It also explained why his captors were so gentle in their attempts to force the memories out of the young man. He was much more valuable alive. Sunny remained motionless for some time, thinking things over. After a while, Kai spoke again, his pleasant voice tinted with a bit of apprehension. Well. Will you help me? Sunny sighed and walked back to the dark fissure of the well. All right. I'll remove this grate, and you can fly out. However, I don't really need your shards. If you want to come out of there alive, you'll have to do something for me instead. The prisoner of the well hesitated, then cautiously asked. What? Sunny smiled. I'll tell you when you need to know. Don't worry, it's nothing serious. I just need help completing a few errands inside the castle. So, do we have a deal or not? If not, I'll be on my way. I've wasted enough time here already. Kai didn't have to think about it too long. Soon, his voice resounded from the darkness once again. We have a deal. It sounded strangely relaxed, as though the young man had become resigned to fate. Sunny slightly frowned and said. Great. One more thing. If you break our agreement and simply fly away, I will find and kill you. This is not a threat, just facts. Do you understand? Kai lingered for a bit before answering. Yeah, no problem. Sunny gazed into the black cavern of the well and hesitated. He was more or less sure that Kai was human, but had to be prepared to act immediately in case he was not. Following his silent command, the stone saint came out of the shadows and kneeled near the well, grasping the grate with her hands. The steel of her gauntlets scraped against the ornate iron, and with some visible effort, she slowly moved the heavy grate to the side. Sunny shivered as he listened to the wrenching sound of iron grinding against stone. The midnight shard appeared in his hands, and he lowered himself into a combat stance with grim resolve. Whatever came out of the well, he was ready to face it. A few seconds passed, each feeling like an eternity. Sunny was tensely staring into the circle of pure darkness in front of him, waiting to see if he was right to trust the prisoner of the well or not. Then, several more seconds passed. And then a few more. Nothing happened. Sunny tilted his head, then asked with some irritation. Aren't you going to come up? After a bit of a delay, the charming voice resounded from the darkness once more. You see, I just thought of something. Sunny sighed and lowered his sword a little. What is it? Kai was silent for some time, then answered with a bit of wariness. It's just that this grate is so heavy that it wouldn't even budge when I tried to move it. It took all 6 of my captors to put it in place, actually. And they were all big, strong men. So. He hesitated. I know that we have already established that we are both human, and it's not that I doubt your honesty, but would you mind explaining to me how is it that you were able to remove it all by yourself? The honorifics were back. Sunny cursed under his breath. This guy was even more paranoid than him. He was unwilling to reveal his hidden ace to Kai, but the cautious prisoner left him with no other choice. Glancing at the shadow saint with a dark expression, Sunny said. That thing is too heavy for me, too. But I was lucky enough to get a very strong echo. Kai seemed to suddenly become very curious. Oh. That is indeed lucky. Very few people in the castle have an echo. I think I know every one of them by name. After a short pause, he added. By the way, what is your name? Sunny rolled his eyes and said through gritted teeth. My name is Sunless. This conversation was entering dangerous waters. Depending on what Kai was going to say next, Sunny might be forced to climb into the well after all. Not to save the young man with a beautiful voice, but to silence him forever. Meanwhile, Kai suddenly laughed. Sunless. That name does not sound like something only a soul-devouring demon would be called at all. Zero chance of that, right? After saying that, he laughed again, this time with a hint of desperation in his voice. However, even then Kai's laugh was very pleasant to the ear. More pleasant than his charming voice, even, but Sunny was in no mood to appreciate its melodious sound. God damn it. Sunny rubbed his temples. Why didn't anyone ever trust him? He was such an honest young man. The most honest young man in the world, really. Annoyed, he said in a flat tone. Very funny. Now, come out of that well before I change my mind. Eventually, Kai stopped laughing and said. There's no one in the castle with that name. At least no one with an echo under their command. Do you maybe live in the outer settlement? Oh, come on. Feeling the pressure of the flaw growing in his mind, Sunny closed his eyes and answered truthfully. No. Kai cleared his throat. So, you are someone who walks the cursed ruins alone at night, possesses the strength of at least 6 men, dwells in the darkness beyond the castle walls, and calls himself Sunless. Did I miss anything? Sunny grimaced. Not really. For a few moments, there was silence. Then, the prisoner of the well said with a voice full of dark humor. Would you climb out of this well to meet a creature like that? Hidden in the darkness of the cursed night, Sunny smiled with a bit of menace and said. If I was in your shoes, I would. And I think that you should do it, too. Do you know why? After a small pause, Kai asked with sincere interest. Why? Sunny stopped smiling and allowed a cold indifference to seep into his voice. Because I can put that grate back anytime. Without waiting for Kai's response, he ordered the stone saint to move the grate a little. A moment later, the horrid sound of iron scraping against stones invaded his ears once again. Almost immediately, the prisoner of the well changed his tune. All right. Wait. Stop. The Shadow Saint released the grate, allowing silence to reign over the lonesome courtyard once again. Kai was quiet for some time, and then said with dejected reluctance. You'd better not be a demon, all right. Stand clear, I'm coming out. Chapter 117 Cruel Injustice. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny felt a soft breeze lightly caress his cheeks, and then something moved in the darkness of the well. Gripping the hilt of the midnight shard tightly, he prepared for the worst. On the other side of the dark fissure, Shadow Saint slowly raised her shield and rested the blade of her sword on its rim. However, they had nothing to fear. A few moments later, a graceful figure appeared in the air, rose above the well, and then gently landed on the stones in front of it. The corner of Sunny's mouth twitched. The owner of the charming voice was, indeed, human. It was a young man wearing a light lamellar armor, with luscious dark auburn hair and mesmerizing green eyes. His well-fitted armor was made out of burnished brown leather, with deep blue embroidered garments beneath. However, for a moment, he wished that Kai actually turned out to be a demon. Because the damn guy not only possessed the most charming voice he had ever heard, but was also drop-dead gorgeous. Honestly, it was simply unfair. Kai was tall, slender, and incredibly handsome. His face was small, perfectly shaped and beautiful, with high cheekbones and flawless ivory skin. His green eyes were nothing short of electric, and his lips were soft and full like, what am I thinking? What's more, he seemed to possess that special type of warm charm that made some people almost irresistibly attractive. Sunny wouldn't be surprised to find out that droves of girls simply fell to Kai's feet every time he happened to casually walk by. Perhaps a few guys, too. Even worse still, the bastard looked like a genuinely nice person, without the smallest trace of arrogance or entitlement on his pretty face. There were playful sparks of humor hiding deep within his eyes, and one could be absolutely sure that when Kai smiled, cute dimples would appear on his cheeks. You couldn't even hate the damn guy. 2 weeks spent in the deep dark pit did nothing to lessen his glamour, too. In short, Kai was the most beautiful person Sunny had ever seen, even compared to other awakened. He looked like one of those screen idols that people love to obsess over, only somehow even more attractive in person. Sunny glanced at himself, feeling a strong desire to grind his teeth in outrage. Well, this is just a cruel injustice, simple as that. Meanwhile, Kai noticed the Shadow Saint's burning ruby eyes, which were the only source of light in the absolute darkness of the night, and flinched back with a paled expression on his face. Oh no! It's a demon after all. Sunny got distracted from his self-pity and blinked. Then, feeling somewhat spiteful, he said. I'm behind you, idiot. Kai froze, then slowly turned around to face him. Sunny didn't fail to notice that the young man held one of his hands out, obviously ready to summon whatever memory he used as a weapon. Blinded by darkness, Kai couldn't see him, of course. Well, good. Let's not let this fellow know that I'm not as, good. Looking as he is for a few more moments. Pretending to be perfectly composed, Sunny asked in a calm voice. Haven't I told you that I had an echo? It's her over there. Well, sort of. That is to say, those aren't my eyes. The handsome sleeper hesitated for a few seconds, then said. Sunless. You really are a human. Up until that moment, both of them were just disembodied voices to each other. But now, while Sunny had already made sure that Kai was not some ancient horror, or at least didn't look like one, the former prisoner of the well was still in the dark, both literally and figuratively. Last time I checked, I was still human, yes. If you have a memory to produce light, you can summon it and see for yourself. Kai lingered. Won't the nightmare creatures be attracted by the light? Smart and cautious. I like him. Sunny shook his head. Usually, they would, but this courtyard is really secluded. Plus, there are not a lot of monsters in this area. I guess that's why those thugs chose this particular place to keep you imprisoned. With a sigh of relief, Kai summoned a paper lantern that glowed with soft yellow light. Sunny hissed. Arg. Damn. Relying on shadow sense to keep track of the young man's movements, he raised a hand and covered his eyes. Accustomed to the darkness, they weren't ready for such a sudden appearance of light. Of course, Sunny knew that this would happen. He allowed himself to be momentarily blinded to give Kai some sense of safety and better convince him of his human nature. Oh. Sorry. The beautiful young man lowered the lantern a little and looked up, trying to finally lay eyes on his mysterious liberator. Then, with a bit of surprise, he slightly lowered his head and looked down. Great, that is not humiliating at all. Kai stared at Sunny for a few seconds and, after realizing that he was indeed a human, offered him a dazzling smile. His smile was as charming as the rest of him. Even the cute dimples that Sunny had imagined would inevitably appear on his cheeks were, indeed, there in all their glory. It was nothing short of obnoxious. Well. What a surprise. I was almost certain that you will turn out to be a terrible monster. But you aren't. You really are a human, and such a cutie too. Sunny coughed. What, did he just call me a cutie? How dare he? I mean, thanks. What is happening? Meanwhile, Kai frowned. But, Sunless. What? The beautiful sleeper blinked a couple of times. Can I ask something? If you really don't live in the castle or in the outer settlement, then where do you live? Sunny shrugged. I mean, are there many options left? I live in the city. Kai hesitated for a bit, but then, suddenly, a light of realization ignited in his mesmerizing green eyes. Oh. I think I've heard of you. Aren't you that crazy kid that lives alone in the ruins? Sunny stared at him with murder in his eyes. Why does everyone keeps calling me, kid? Why does everyone keep calling me, crazy? I'm not crazy. With a deep sigh, he answered. Indeed, that's me. You can call me Sunny, by the way. Once you get to know me better, you'll realize that I am not, in fact, that crazy. Kai looked at him with doubt. Noticing that, Sunny grinned. He decided to tease the obnoxiously gorgeous young man a little. Of course, with the limitations of his flaw, that was going to require a bit of finesse. Putting too much enthusiasm in his voice, Sunny said. And I don't actually live alone. I have plenty of creatures to keep me company, you might even call them my friends. There's a talking rock that sometimes tells me to do stuff. There's also my shadow, it has a lot of interesting opinions. He stared at Kai with a sincere smile. When the young man's handsome face became a little pale, Sunny laughed. Gee, relax, man. I am just joking around with you. Then he looked down at the shadow and added in a dark, angry tone. They're not really my friends. I actually can't stand that rock, and the shadow and I barely talk these days. Chapter 118 Mirror Image. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Perhaps joking around with Kai was a bit cruel, but Sunny was really annoyed by how ridiculously good-looking the other sleeper was. Plus, he had not talked to another human in such a long time that his already lacking communication skills had become truly rusty. Since they were going to visit the castle soon, Sunny had to prepare himself for the inevitable moment when he would be forced to talk to strangers. Stretching his flaw to its limits was a good practice. He wouldn't want for something like that accident to happen again. The unpleasant memory soured Sunny's mood. Meanwhile, Kai was staring at him with a very strange expression on his face. Sunny cleared his throat. That was a part of the joke, by the way. The handsome young man continued to stare, his face full of doubt. Did I go too hard on this poor guy? He must have been scared out of his wits already. He's probably in an utter panic now. Who wouldn't be a bit apprehensive about meeting a madman? Yeah, maybe it wasn't as funny as I thought. Kai cautiously shook his head. It's not that. I just feel like I have to inform you about something. Sunny raised an eyebrow. Yeah. About what? Kai hesitated, then said in a very calming tone. It's about my flaw. I can actually tell when someone is lying to me. So, when you said that there's a rock that tells you what to do, I knew that it was true right away. Sunny glared at the beautiful young man with an incredulous expression. Internally, he didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Flaw? How is that a flaw? That's a damn superpower, you despicable bastard. Why was that Kai so lucky? He had the charming voice, the tall stature, the perfect face. Even his flaw was a damn blessing. Coincidentally, it was also a perfect counter to the better half of Sunny's tricks. If Kai had not informed him about this strange flaw of his, Sunny would have gotten himself into really big trouble pretty soon. Luckily, the beautiful young man happened to be a very honest guy. What an angel. While Sunny was seething in outrage, Kai said in a gentle tone. So Sunny, what exactly does that rock ask you to do? Do you maybe want to tell me? Sunny sighed. I'll have to be really, really careful and watch what I say around this guy. Well, you're no fun at all. The talking rock is actually a memory capable of repeating words. I use it as an alarm occasionally, so it mainly tells me to wake up. As for that stuff I told about my shadow being opinionated, that's also true. But you already know, I suppose. My shadow has a bit of personality due to its function within my aspect. Kai thought about it, then smiled. Oh, I see. So it was really a joke. Very crafty. Sorry to ruin it with my flaw. Sunny scowled. Don't you patronize me. Then he stopped, thought about something, and said angrily. Wait, if you can tell when someone is lying, then why did I have to spend half an hour convincing you to get out of that well? Kai blinked a couple of times, looking innocent and hurt. Well, how do I know if my flaw works on nightmare creatures? I've never had a conversation with one before. A person can never be too careful when making deals with ancient horrors, you know. Sunny covered his face with a hand. Yeah, I know. Kai looked at him with concern. Sunny. Are you all right? This is those cursed strings of fate screwing with me again. What are the odds of meeting a person whose flaw is almost the exact opposite of mine? And why is he so goddamn stunning? Is that supposed to be the opposite of how I look, huh? Huh. I am. Anyway. Let's get down to business. Kai sighed. Of course. A promise is a promise. I will help you do whatever it is you want to do in the castle. Shall we go together? Sunny shook his head. Not yet. I'll have to stop by a place first. Do you know the big ruined cathedral to the south of here? The other sleeper thought for a bit, then nodded. I think I do. I fly over that part of the city often, and it's hard to miss. Are you taking me there? Good question. On one hand, Sonny didn't want anyone to know where he lived. On the other hand, he didn't trust Kai enough to simply let him return to the castle and wait there. But moving through the city with a source of light was not something he was prepared to do, either. Was there a compromise? I can't take you anywhere with that lantern of yours. I survive by hiding in the darkness, remember. So you can go on and fly to the cathedral on your own. Wait for me on the roof. Kai looked south, remembering the location of the ruined temple, and nodded. All right. Sonny raised a hand, stopping the young man from flying away. Wait. Whatever happens, don't go inside the cathedral, okay? I'm not joking. There's a fallen devil residing inside, so if you do, he'll butcher you just like he had butchered that bunch of idiots who had kidnapped you. Kai stared at him in shock. What? They are dead. Sonny shrugged. How do you think I found you in that well? One of the dead thugs had a map on his body. I thought there'll be treasure hidden in the marked location. But. The beautiful sleeper smiled. But it was something much better. Ah, thank you for the compliment. I'll be careful not to enter the cathedral, rest assured. Sonny stared at the smiling Kai for some time, then shrugged in exasperation. Sure. Off you go, then. And remember, if you break our agreement, I will. Find and kill me, yeah. Don't worry, Sonny. I never break a promise. With these words, Kai raised his head and looked up. A soft gust of wind touched Sonny's skin, and in the next moment, the charming sleeper suddenly soared above the ground, quickly disappearing into the sky. Soon, only a tiny dot of his paper lantern could be seen, moving south through the black skies like a lonely star. Suddenly, Sonny trembled. A cold feeling of dread grasped his heart like an iron grip. Following the dot of light with his eyes, he whispered. Eddie, there was a lonely star burning in the black skies, and under its light, the castle was suddenly consumed by fire, with rivers of blood flowing down its halls. He stood for a while in the darkness, motionless. If Sonny didn't know better, he would have thought that this part of Cassie's prophecy talked about Kai. But he did know better. He had known the truth of that prophecy for some time now. Lowering his head, Sonny licked his lips and asked the voiceless shadow in a raspy voice. Is it already starting? Like always, the shadow did not answer. What a stupid question. Of course not. It had started a long time ago. Right at the moment when the three of them had entered the ruined city. Chapter 119. A Fistful of Soul Shards. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It took Sonny some time to find his way back to the cathedral. With the approach of the dawn, the nightmare creatures that hunted at night grew restless. He had to be especially careful as he lurked through the narrow streets, keeping to the darkest patches of shadow. Even though there was no moon or stars in the lightless night of the Forgotten Shore, many of the monsters here had their own ways of perceiving shapes moving through the darkness. Their ability to see in the dark was somewhat offset by Sonny's Child of Shadows attribute, which allowed him to become indistinguishable from any shadow that he dove in. However, he still had to be cautious. In this cursed place, nothing was ever certain, except for danger, death, and terror. Some time later, he climbed the familiar pillars of the cathedral and appeared on its vast roof. Walking on the wide ridge separating two slanting expanses of ancient tiles, he approached Kai, who was standing nervously some distance away. The beautiful young man was grasping a longbow made of horn in his hands, staring into the darkness with a tense expression on his pale face. Sonny stopped a few steps away from him and looked at that bow for a long time. There's not much time left. To avoid getting an arrow between his eyes, Sonny decided to announce his arrival with a gentle greeting. Hey, Kai. I'm here. The archer turned around with a startled expression and raised a hand, as though trying to summon his lantern. However, he thought better of it, afraid to attract unwanted attention. Instead, Kai gulped and whispered. Lower your voice. What if that fallen devil hears us? Sunny blinked. Oh, right. He's a very careful person. Which was a great personality trait to have, as far as he was concerned. The more paranoid, the better. Smiling inwardly, he said. Relax, he won't. Kai stared at him with doubt, then asked. Are you sure? Sunny gave him a nod. Yes. He was prepared to explain the reason behind this confidence, but, surprisingly, Kai immediately believed him and calmed down. Right, he knows when people are lying to him. Which means that he also knows when they're telling the truth. And since I can only tell the truth, he can pretty much believe everything I say without the need to ask unnecessary questions. Come to think of it, that flaw of his was actually very convenient. Meanwhile, Kai cautiously looked around and asked. So, what are we going to do here? Sunny gestured at the group of shattered tiles not too far away from them and answered in a calm tone. I'm going to climb into that hole and retrieve something from the temple. You just wait here until I return. Kai's eyes widened. Are you crazy? What about the devil? What about that bastard? Sunny couldn't help but fantasize about slaughtering the damn creature for a few seconds. The day will come. Returning to the present situation, he said. What about him? I told you, I'm good at hiding. As long as I know who I'm dealing with, they won't be able to notice me unless I want them to. He had learned that first part of the sentence the hard way. Actually, it was the bastard who taught him that even concealment of shadows had its limits. That's how Sunny ended up with his insides on his outside and in possession of this vital piece of information. Some lessons you only needed to receive once to remember them forever. Kai was looking at him with a strange expression again. Sunny frowned. What? The beautiful young man shook his head. No. It's just that, it's an awesome ability. I wish I had an ability like that, to be honest. Sunny glared at him and uttered through gritted teeth. Says the guy who can fly. Why would you want to hide your perfectly symmetrical face anyway? Tired of being ogled by love-stricken supermodels? Kai sighed. Something like that. How did you know? Sunny opened his mouth, then closed it again. Anyway, wait for me here. I won't be long. Throwing a glance at the charming sleeper, he shook his head and walked over to the hole hidden behind several broken tiles. Soon, he was back in his secret lair. Looking around with a bit of apprehension, Sunny sighed and removed the rucksack fashioned from the skin of a monster from his back. Then, he unloaded the strips of carapace centurion's meat on the silver plate and walked over to the iron chest. To be honest, he really didn't want to go anywhere near the castle. The idea alone made him long to stay in this dark, quiet, familiar room forever. But he couldn't. If he wanted to make the Shadow Saint stronger, he had to return to the human settlement and risk facing his fears. Whatever. I'll just go in and out. Kai will be the one doing all the work, anyway. With a heavy sigh, he raised the lid of the chest and began loading his rucksack with soul shards. Dozens of beautiful crystals were soon glittering inside. Sunny only took half of them, but the amount was already enough to drive many people to murder. He couldn't really blame them. On the Forgotten Shore, shards represented money, and money represented life. Without it, you couldn't buy yourself a place within the safety of the castle or procure food without having to risk death in the cursed maze of the city. Anyone would be willing to commit murder in order to survive. Keep telling yourself this. With an angry grimace, Sunny shut the rucksack tightly, made sure that no light seeped through its seams, and turned around. Glancing at his peaceful hidden lair one last time, he shut his eyes for a moment, and then walked away without looking back. It was time to return to the castle. And all the terrible memories he had left there before running away. Chapter 120 Approaching the Castle. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Washed in the ghostly light of the nascent dawn, Sunny and Kai were walking through the ruins of the cursed city. The night was slowly crawling away. Its retreat made one of them feel safer, while the other one grew uneasy without the familiar veil of darkness hiding him from the world. I have almost forgotten how mournful this place looks when the sun is up. Somewhere in the distance, the waves of the dark sea were halting their eternal assault on the stone walls of the ancient city. These walls had withstood thousands of years of wear and abuse without allowing even a single drop of black water to seep through. Sunny suspected that they would stand unbroken for 1,000 years more. Suddenly uncomfortable, he turned his head west and found the distant silhouette of the Crimson Spire. The menacing structure was looming over the forgotten shore like an evil omen, spelling doom to anyone who would dare approach it. Maybe not. Sunny had chosen a complicated and meandering route to reach the castle. Kai, who was less familiar with the cursed city, simply followed behind. The charming young man was alert and collected, his bow ready to send arrows flying at any moment. They had to circle around many areas where especially terrifying creatures were known to dwell and hunt, making slow progress. Still, it was better to be safe than sorry. At some point, Sunny raised his hand, gesturing for his companion to stop. He peered into the distance with a deep frown on his face. Kai glanced at him and whispered. "What is it?" Sunny brought a finger to his lips before answering. "Shh, listen." Soon, they heard an eerie sound that resembled stifled, heart-wrenching weeping. It was as though there was a crying woman in the fog ahead of them, slowly drawing closer. Her trembling sobs made both sleepers shiver. Kai looked at him and asked without much confidence. "What are the chances that it's actually a human girl?" Sunny gave him a crooked smile. "Low." Without needing to discuss it, they hid behind a large pile of rubble and waited. Pressing himself against the cold stones, Sunny sent his shadow to climb the building and observe the surrounding streets. Kai saw the shadow off with a bewildered look, blinked a couple of times, but didn't say anything. A minute or two later, Sunny glanced at him and asked. "Where are your arrows?" The charming young man hesitated, then said. "I usually carry a quiver with a few dozen arrows that were specially crafted for me by one of the best blacksmiths in the castle. But the gentlemen who put me in that well, may they rest in peace, weren't kind enough to let me bring it." Sunny gave him an amused look. "So that bow of yours is actually useless?" Kai lingered for a few moments before answering. "That I also have arrow-type memories." "How many?" The elegant archer lowered his gaze in embarrassment. 2. Will that be enough?" Sunny was silent for a bit, and then answered in a flat tone. "No. I don't think that will be enough." Out there in the fog, his shadow was looking at the creature that had been producing the heart-wrenching weeping. It was not a human girl. A massive, four-legged beast was walking through the morning mist. Its flesh was rotten and emaciated, hanging from the bones like a tattered coat. Sunny could clearly see the white arcs of its ribs through the holes in the rotting hide, the unnatural darkness hiding behind them, and the powerful jaws of the partially bared dog-like skull that were full of terrifying teeth. One didn't have to be a genius to understand that the horrid creature was one of the fallen masters of the ruined city. As he was looking, the beast opened its maw and produced another long, human-like sob, then stopped and listened, as though waiting for an answer. When nothing happened, it lowered its head and slowly continued on its way. Luckily, although their hiding spot was somewhat close, it wasn't actually on its path. If nothing changed, the fallen would walk past without even noticing them. They just had to wait. Sunny sighed. "We'll have to stay here for 10 minutes, at least. Get comfortable." Once again, Kai didn't ask anything, simply taking Sunny's word for it. It seemed as though his strange ability to sense lies made the charming sleeper less prone to having a lot of questions. Which was a wonderful quality to have, as far as Sunny was concerned. With nothing to do but wait, they had a bit of time to rest and catch their breaths. Sunny summoned the endless spring and took a few sips of cold, sweet water. Noticing that Kai was staring at him, he hesitated, then passed him the beautiful glass bottle. The charming young man drank greedily, as though someone dying from thirst. Come to think of it. Feeling a little guilty, Sunny asked. When was the last time they gave you water? Kai detached himself from the bottle, wiped his lips, and smiled in pure delight. Ah. 2 or 3 days ago, I think. Thank you kindly. He returned the bottle and looked at Sunny with curiosity. Hey, Sunny. Can I ask you something? Sunny tensed up and gave the charming archer a dark look. You can. His eyes, however, hinted that he shouldn't. But Kai either didn't notice the menacing glare or wasn't bothered by it. You came to the Forgotten Shore this last solstice, right? Yeah. Sunny held his breath, guessing what the beautiful sleeper was going to ask him. How they had survived in the labyrinth. Why he had abandoned the castle. How he had survived in the ruins. Each of these questions could potentially lead to a disaster. Kai leaned forward with excitement in his eyes, hesitated for a second, and then said. What's the top music video in the charts out there right now? Sunny blinked. What? That was absolutely not what he had expected to hear. Noticing that the charming young man was staring at him with anticipation, he shifted and answered with a bit of uncertainty. I have no idea. Kai sighed, clearly disappointed, but then suddenly smiled again. The smile was wide and dazzling. Can I ask you another question?